So today we're going to be talking with John Kabourakis. He's a gun owner from the state of New Jersey, and we'll talk a little bit about a recent experience that he had. John, thank you for giving me your time today to talk to me. How you doing?
Great to be talking to you. I've seen a lot of your work, and I was anxious to get together and speak with you today.
No, I really appreciate this, and I know we were playing a little bit of tag on trying to get the schedules to line up, so I'm glad we were able to do this. So, John, let's just start out with, who are you? What's your deal? So you're a guy from Jersey, you're a family man, you're a small businessman. Let's talk a little bit about who you are and what you're all about.
So I've lived in Monmouth County, New Jersey for more than 30 years now. I live in Howell, New Jersey currently. I've been here for about 15 years and got married when I first moved down here. I have two kids now, a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. I own a construction business, and I've been in business for 23 years. And we do work all over New Jersey, Pennsylvania, even up into New York. I'm just, a regular father of two kids that basically spends a good deal of his day driving the kids around, and just like many other people in this area.
So how would you describe this community in this area, like Monmouth County in general, and Howell?
It's a quaint suburban area. Howell itself is very rural, and it's a great place to live. We have everything we need right here. We're close to the beach. We're an hour outside of New York City. Our family is big into skiing. We go skiing in Pennsylvania quite often, and it takes 2 hours to get there. We're also just over an hour away from Philadelphia, so we're in a great location geographically, and it's a fantastic little town. We love it here. My kids, it's all they know. They've been here since they were born.
Well, one of the things that, and I've covered this before myself, and I think you've noticed it as well, is there's been some issues in Monmouth County, and it's really not just Monmouth County, but Monmouth County gets targeted because we do have these little bedroom communities in here, Howell, and then you have like Manalapan, Colts Neck, even Middletown, some of the Rumson, some of these other areas, even the more ritzier areas that are a little bit more well off than even our area, um, dealing with crime and outsiders. What have you noticed, and like what would you describe about that phenomenon? Because you've got your finger kind of on the pulse here. You're a community member.
Yeah. So I would say probably within the last 2 to 3 years, roughly, kind of around the time of COVID, we started hearing more and more alarming news about cars getting stolen out of people's driveways, which is something that you never heard. Like I said, I've been living here for 15 years. We never had anyone had a car stolen out of their driveway. It was mostly happening a little bit further up north, and then what happened is people started to adapt. They stopped keeping their key fobs in their cars, which made it easy pickings for the criminals. And once they did that, then these criminals started to move further down, because the majority of the people that are perpetrating these crimes are coming from the northern parts of the state, typically the inner cities. And again, when people stopped leaving their key fobs in their cars, they started to move their way further and further south. So now we're pretty much at the point where everyone's got the message. No one leaves their key fobs in their car anymore. So now it's starting to escalate. Now what we're seeing is burglaries, home invasions. For the most part, these criminals are looking to steal cars. They want key fobs. But again, it's been escalating, and who knows where it will end.
Right, and there's been a lot going on with that as well. And it's not just the cars. We've had all kinds of people getting their catalytic converters, stolen right
Yes.
out of their driveways. I don't think a week, maybe 2 weeks could go by without getting some sort of a notification or reading something in the local news about somebody being in a property where they're not supposed to. I think just the other week there was a couple of guys that somebody caught on their Ring camera, in their backyard walking around and, scoping out the joint. So that is a big thing. And like you said, the key fob thing, which has always been insane to me because I always lock my doors, lock my car, keep the keys
Yeah.
away. What they're doing too now is now they're popping the RF frequencies off of the fobs. If they're close by, they can steal those and then still access your car. So if you got your keys close to your front door or whatever, you have a bowl that you keep them in, and that's another thing that I think we're seeing in New Jersey and here in right here in Howell as well.
Absolutely.
So we're once a very quiet community. Is the immunity from crime is not there anymore. And let's face the facts: criminals want to steal stuff from nice neighborhoods. They don't want to steal stuff from bad neighborhoods. They want to steal nice stuff.
Exactly. And the incentive is there for them because it's right now it's pretty easy for them to fence these cars and the stolen merchandise. And that's, something that really is contributing greatly to the problem.
So let's change gears a little bit here. You're a gun guy. Why don't we talk about that? So how did you get into this? What are you doing? Are you rappelling from buildings on the weekend and you're training for the apocalypse? Where do you land here? Where are you in this community?
Hardly, John. I think I'm a pretty typical gun owner. I own a few guns. I bought my first gun 15 years ago, a handgun. Since then, I bought a shotgun. I own a couple of rifles. And my wife, over the last 2 years, has gotten into guns. She came to me. I didn't pressure her at all. She came to me suddenly and said that she wanted to get her firearms ID card. I think it was, kind of politically motivated at first. And now she's really, gotten into it. We go to the range together, and she enjoys it. And I can tell you, she gives me a run for my money as far as her accuracy in shooting.
Well, women shooters, it's funny, they're usually way better students at shooting than men are. And it's very simple. They're focused. They pay attention.
Yeah.
They actually listen. They follow instructions. So I think that's great. So you've been doing some training then. So you got into some training a little bit here and there?
I've done some training. I enjoy it. I find it interesting. I have a couple of different ranges that I go to, a couple of different trainers that I've worked with over the last few years. I've learned a lot. I just find, when you really start to get into, it's one thing it's very easy to purchase a gun and own a gun and throw it in your safe and go to the range once in a while and use it. But when you really start to learn about guns and the fundamentals behind shooting accuracy and certain disciplines, it gets really fascinating. And I started to fall into that when, a few years ago. So especially, now that I'm doing it together with my wife, it's actually a little bit easier because now we can do it together.
So this is a fun recreational thing for you, and it's also a skill that comes in handy as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure.
So back to the range. So you've been going, you said visiting the range maybe, every 4 to 6 weeks. So about once a month you try to make it to the range to just, because you enjoy it, right?
I do. It's interesting. It's fun, and you're surrounded by a lot of like-minded people, and you pick up little tidbits about guns and gun law. You also learn about fundamentals. So it's a continuing thing. Every time I pick up a gun, I learn something new. It seems.
Sure, and that's just because of a curiosity. It's not like you've made this your life. You're not.
Not by any means. Yeah. I'm not a police officer. I'm not in the military. And
you're not jumping in the plane, flying all over the country to chase gun stuff. You're just doing what you're doing and you're meeting the people you meet along the way. I think that's great. And it's a very American story for sure.
I think so.
So you have a I'd say very special, very successful story to share, and that's what kind of brought us together in the first place.
Right.
Not because you're just interesting, you are interesting, but you also have a very, I think, important story to tell. So why don't we talk about what happened, when, and let's get into the minutia of that.
Yeah, it was back on February 29th. I had just woken up. It was about 5:30 in the morning. My wife and I both woke up around the same time. We hadn't even gotten out of bed yet. And suddenly I heard this loud noise, and I instantly knew that it wasn't normal. It was still dark out at the time. It was a cold morning. Kids were sleeping. They almost never get up that early, especially on a weekday. And I jumped up, asked my wife if she heard the noise. She said she did. I was a little bit more alarmed than she was, but the first thing I did was I grabbed my gun. I said, I'm going to go check it out. And if I'm going to go check it out, I'd like to have my gun with me because who knows what's going on. So I walked out of my bedroom down a second story landing that I have. It's kind of a hallway that overlooks pretty much most of the first floor in the house. And when I got to the end of that hallway, I'm looking down into my kitchen area and I see a flashlight moving through my kitchen. And all of a sudden, a person came into my focus wearing a hoodie, a mask, gloves, and carrying the flashlight. And instantly I was like, still kind of half asleep, but I, just, kicked into survival mode instantly and said to myself, now this is real. I need to act and I need to be very cautious and careful about what I'm doing. So I tried not to give my position away, but then the person somehow must have seen me because that person stopped, kind of tried to hide the flashlight against their side, and then looked, you had to look down a little bit to see up where I was because the person's view was a little bit obstructed. And as soon as that person looked at me, I turned on a weapon mounted light that I had on my handgun. I pointed it at the person, and that person instantly turned and ran away. Turns out there were two other people, one in the house, one just outside the house, peering into my dining room window. They all just immediately fled once I raised my gun. So, as you said, it was a successful encounter that I faced, and fortunately, it didn't escalate beyond that. But disheartening, and not something that anyone wants to ever wake up to. You think about your house and your privacy, your families. And my kids were sleeping. It's dark out. Turns out these criminals showed up in a stolen car too. Stolen car. They broke into my dining room window by prying it open. Just a pretty egregious bunch of acts that led to this situation. And very, very unfortunate. I'd always heard about burglaries in the past where typically a burglar comes into your house. They don't want you to be home. They come into the house in the middle of the day, right? So we didn't normally leave the alarm set at night because we felt like we were relatively safe. Yes, I had a gun. I was always trying to be diligent. We have cameras. However, we felt like we were relatively safe. Again, we talked about how and what a great community is. There are a lot of people that, up until recently, were leaving their key fobs in their cars. People would leave their doors to their house open at night while they were sleeping. We always felt like we were not going to ever fall victim to something like this. Now that's all changed. Obviously, we sleep with the alarm on at night now. We've taken other steps in security to make sure that we're safer. We have a lot of layers of protection in place right now. But just a very unfortunate situation. Not something we ever thought would happen. However, thankfully, despite I didn't think that it would ever happen, I was pretty much ready for it, and things turned out to be a best case scenario.
That is, and you're one of the millions of Americans that annually self-defend or defend others with a firearm. You did not have to use your firearm, and I think you're thankful for that. But you're also thankful that you had your firearm because it was able to help get the people out of your home, and
Yes.
that's a successful self-defense.
Yes.
And I think that's great. And even though you're sitting here telling me, you said, well, we've taken even further precautions. You said it. You said you were prepared. But you saw that there's even more that you can do to harden yourself, harden your life.
You're gonna get shot. Dave, call 911. Call 911.
What kind of impact has this made on the family? How's everyone been doing in the aftermath? You don't have to get into too many details here, but
Fortunately, this had happened to a few of my neighbors over the last couple of years, and they were all pretty shaken. And I had, prior to it happening to me, wondered how I would handle it, wonder how my family would handle it. And fortunately, my kids and my wife are very resilient, and they got through it, very quickly. I, I think a big part of it was the way it turned out, the way it panned out, how the burglars just immediately scattered, like a bunch of cockroaches when you open a light, and it became laughable. Though it was a serious situation and could have been a lot worse, it kind of became laughable. But that was because we were able to effectively protect ourselves because of a gun. And it it's everybody handles these things differently, but fortunately in my case, doesn't seem to really have affected the kids that negatively. It's on their mind. They know now that it can happen. They do have a sense of fear, I would say. However, it's not captivating them. It's not something that is keeping them up at night. So, I'm thankful for that.
if you had to compare your experience, say, to, you mentioned some other neighbors or acquaintances that you had that had a similar situation happen to them, how would you compare their preparedness to your preparedness?
Well, a sense that I got from many people that this has happened to, or many people that I've talked to that fear this could happen to them, is just helplessness. And I never felt helpless. I felt like, yeah, listen, my life could be in danger, but I felt like, I could defend myself. And again, it comes down to having a gun. And when I bought that first handgun 15 years ago, that was the primary reason of purchasing that handgun, was for self-defense in my home. And everything that kind of came later on was more recreational. And again, 15 years, never needed a gun for self-defense, but here I am. Suddenly I need one, and I'm thankful that I had it. And I mentioned that I do have a handful of guns. Turns out the gun that I used to defend myself that morning was that very first handgun that I bought 15 years ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It doesn't help your case for all the other ones that you bought if you had to justify them. Like, well, you only needed the first one you bought. But we'll pretend that didn't happen.
There you go.
No, that's great. What's your overall message, I guess, to the public at large? What would you say to them about what you learned, about your experience, and what you went through?
Be prepared. I've had many friends, family, neighbors reach out to me, to give me some support, and it's been great. Some really great people that I'm surrounded by, and it's been much appreciated. Many of them don't own any guns at all, but they have, in many cases, told me that they plan on now purchasing their first gun, because this kind of hit close to home for them, being that we're close to each other. So what I encourage everyone is, when you buy that first gun, you have to familiarize yourself with proper gun handling. You have to learn trigger discipline, muscle discipline. Those are the fundamentals. Everything else can come later on, but safety is key. And also proper storage is a big thing, especially if you have younger kids around. You have to store that gun properly. And then everything else will start to fall into place. But I encourage everyone to go to the range to train, because shooting a gun, anybody can pull a trigger on a gun, but being accurate, that's a whole other ball game. And it takes a lot of practice to get to the point where you can pick up that gun and shoot accurately. And if you plan on using it in self-defense, you only want to shoot the bad guy. You don't want to shoot friendly or a stranger, or, God forbid, a family member. So, and it takes a lot of discipline to be able to do that, especially when you're in a traumatic situation where your adrenaline's pumping. So it's really my message to people that are looking to get into guns is train, familiarize yourself, educate yourself, And don't fear guns, because if you do all the right things, then you'll be safe around guns. I can tell you that with my years of handling guns myself, that they shouldn't be feared.
And to that message there saying, don't fear guns, what would you say specifically to the people that are dug in, anti-gun, or just maybe even on the fence about it? What would be your message to them about the situation that you just lived through with your family?
I can't imagine what it would be like to be in a situation like that and not have a gun. I hoped, I just turned 50 years old in January. I've never in my life until February 29th needed a gun to defend myself. And I'm thankful that I had one. If I was in that situation without a gun, I perhaps would have felt as helpless as some of those people that I mentioned earlier. And I don't, it's my Second Amendment right to not be helpless. And that morning I exercised my Second Amendment right. And because of it, it pretty much ended there. Now, could it happen again? Sure. I'll be more ready if it happens again.
Sure. Well, John, thank you very much for your time. Do you have any other message for everyone or anything else that you want to get out there that we didn't cover?
You just, mentioned there are some people who are dug in that are anti-gun, and there's some people whose minds are never going to be changed. I get that, but for the people that are on the fence, there's a lot of bad information out there on guns. I would say talk to people who know what they're talking about, like you. Read your book, read your publication. There's some great information out there. You don't even have to leave your house. You can go on YouTube and find some great information that could kind of at least reduce that stigma for you and make you feel a little bit more comfortable about guns.
Well, perfect, John. Well, thank you very much for your time. I very much so appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to probably catching up with you again here in the future, too, just to talk about how things changed for you going down the line and how everything else went.
That'd be great.
All right, thanks a lot.
Got it, John. Thank you.